The morning I walked out of Bowdoin Institution, it was -18, and the kind of dry Alberta cold that gets into your chest before you've taken your second breath. I stood on the road with a garbage bag holding everything I owned. A change of clothes, my reading glasses, and a Bible someone had left in my cell that I never actually opened. The guard, who processed my release, didn't say anything except good luck. I don't think he meant it. I was 63 years old. I had spent 14 months inside for a crime my son-in-law engineered, and my daughter stood by and watched happen. Let me back up. I built Calvert Mechanical over 32 years, HVAC contracting, commercial and industrial, mostly. We did hospitals, school districts, a couple of the big box retail builds out near Red Deer. At our peak, we had 22 employees and a reputation clean enough that general contractors called us before they even put jobs to tender. I wasn't rich by any measure a Bay Street banker would recognize, but I owned my home outright. I had retirement savings, and I had a business worth something. I had built that with my hands and my name, and every Saturday I ever gave up because a job wasn't right and needed to be done again. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter because that's what she was, at least in law, was the person I trusted most in the world after her mother died. My wife passed from pancreatic cancer 8 years before any of this happened. Fast, brutal, 3 months from diagnosis to funeral. After that, it was just the two of us, my daughter and me, and whatever that grief does to people, it made us close in a way I thought was unbreakable. She started working in the business when she was in her late 20s. Bookkeeping at first, then operations, then she was effectively running the office while I ran the field side of things. It felt right. It felt like legacy. My wife would have been proud. I told myself that 100 times. She married her husband about 4 years before everything collapsed. I had my reservations from the beginning, the kind of quiet unease you feel in your gut but can't put a name to. He was charming in the way that people are charming when they've practiced it. He had opinions about everything, including my business, which he shared freely even when nobody asked. He worked in commercial real estate finance, or said he did. I never fully understood what his job actually produced, but my daughter loved him and he treated her well enough in front of me, so I kept my mouth shut. He started coming to family dinners with ideas. That's how it began. Just ideas. He knew a developer who was trying to bring in a portfolio of multi-builds north of Edmonton. Cash flow opportunity, he said. Short-term bridge financing. In and out in 18 months. Strong return. He framed it like he was doing me a favor by including me. I said no the first time. I said no the second time. The third time he brought it in front of my daughter at Sunday dinner, and she looked at me across the table with those eyes that still reminded me of her mother and said she thought it was worth considering. I want to be clear about something. I am not a foolish man. I have signed contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I understand risk, but I was also 61 years old and still carrying grief I hadn't processed, and the person I trusted most in the world was asking me to trust her judgment. I signed a personal guarantee on a $680,000 investment vehicle that my son-in-law structured. I didn't read every page the way I should have. That is my failure, and I will carry it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known without a forensic accountant, was that he had been systematically using Calvert Mechanical's operating accounts as collateral for a series of private lending arrangements that had nothing to do with the development project he'd described. He had set up a numbered company in Alberta and another in British Columbia. The numbered company was structured to look, at a glance, like a subsidiary of Calvert Mechanical. It wasn't. But the paper trail was designed so that if anything unraveled, the liability ran uphill to me. When the developer he was supposedly partnered with went into receivership in the spring, everything came apart at once. The CRA audit started 6 weeks later. Then the RCMP Commercial Crime Unit. By October, I was sitting in a lawyer's office in Red Deer, being told I was facing charges under the criminal code. Fraud over $5,000, breach of trust, and a third charge I still don't fully understand because the lawyer explained it in language that felt designed to keep me confused and afraid. My daughter sat across from me in that meeting. She had hired her own lawyer, separately. She held her husband's hand. She said she hadn't known about the accounts. She said she'd only done what I told her to do. She said it quietly, and she didn't look at me when she said it. I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. The particular quality of her voice, the way she adjusted her coat. How her husband put his hand on her knee, like he was steadying her. I couldn't afford the forensic accountant who might have untangled things in time. I had a decent criminal defense lawyer, but decent and exceptional are different things, and the evidence on paper, the way my son-in-law had constructed it, pointed squarely at me. My name was on the accounts. My signature appeared on authorizations I did not remember signing, which the Crown's expert said were consistent with my handwriting. I told anyone who would listen that those signatures weren't mine. Nobody moved quickly enough for it to matter. The bail hearing went badly. The judge cited flight risk, which was almost darkly funny given that I'd lived in central Alberta my entire life. I was remanded. I spent 14 months in Bowden before my lawyer finally got a forensic document examiner's report entered that created enough doubt to negotiate a plea arrangement. Not an acquittal, which is what I deserved, but a time-served disposition that got me out. The first month inside, I was in shock. I don't mean that as a figure of speech. I stopped eating properly. I lost 19 pounds. A man I'll call a friend, a former trucker named Bernard, who had 10 months left on his own sentence, started sitting with me at meals without being asked. He didn't offer platitudes. He just sat there and eventually started talking, and after a while I started talking back. Bernard taught me two things that mattered more than anything else I learned inside. The first was patience, not the passive kind, not resignation, the kind of patience that is actually a form of strategy, waiting until you can see clearly before you move. The second was this: write everything down, every conversation you remember, every document you signed, every date, because memory fades and paper doesn't. I filled 4 notebooks. My son-in-law made one serious mistake, and I didn't know about it until my lawyer got access to the full disclosure package in my 12th month inside. In the email chain between him and the numbered company's administrator, a man he'd hired who had apparently developed second thoughts and turned over a copy to his own solicitor, there was a message, sent 18 months before my arrest, that read in part, "If this gets looked at, the paper will point to my name. He doesn't track the accounts closely enough to know the difference." 17 words. That's what 14 months of my life was worth to him. 17 words in an email he wrote casually, the way you'd write about picking up milk. My lawyer took that email and the forensic handwriting report and sat across from the Crown prosecutor and laid out what a trial would now look like. The Crown agreed to the time-served disposition. There was no full acquittal. There was no apology from the court, not in those words. What there was, in the end, was a letter from the Crown's office that acknowledged the new evidence and confirmed no further charges would be pursued. My son-in-law's situation became considerably more complicated once the email was disclosed. He is currently facing his own charges. I am not permitted to say more than that, and honestly, I don't feel the need to. That story is no longer mine to carry. My daughter called me the week after I got out. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times over the following month. The last message was 11 minutes long. I listened to it once, sitting in the kitchen of the rented room I was staying in, with a cup of coffee going cold on the table. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't understood what he was doing until it was too late. She said she'd been afraid of him by the end, which I'm not sure I believe entirely, and I'm not sure she's lying either, and I've made peace with not knowing. She said she wanted her daughter to know her grandfather. That last part was what I kept coming back to. My granddaughter was born while I was inside. I found out from my brother, who lives in Calgary, and who had stayed in contact with my daughter despite everything, because he's a more forgiving man than I am, or maybe just more pragmatic. My granddaughter's name is a perfectly ordinary name that I won't put here because some things are private. She was 14 months old when I walked out of Bowden. I did not call my daughter back, not then, but I called my brother, and I asked him about the little girl and whether she was all right, and he said she was healthy and bright and had just started pulling herself up on the furniture and toppling over and thinking it was funny. He described her laughing, and I sat with that image for a long time. Getting back on my feet took longer than I expected and was also faster than I had any right to hope. The business was gone. The receivership had seen to that. But my name in the trades is the kind of thing that doesn't vanish entirely. A former subcontractor I'd worked with for 15 years offered me part-time consulting work 6 weeks after I got out. Not charity, Actual work, problems he needed solved, and he paid me properly. That small dignity meant more than I can explain. I was renting a room in a house in Innisfail. I drove a truck that needed new brake lines. I ate supper at the kitchen table by myself and watched the news and went to bed early. It was a reduced life, but it was mine and nobody could take it. Bernard got out 2 months after me. He had a sister in Lethbridge. I drove down on a Saturday and took him to lunch, and we sat in a diner for 3 hours and drank bad coffee and talked. He was quieter on the outside than he'd been inside, which surprised me. I think the world feels louder when you've been away from it for a while. I gave him the name of the subcontractor I was working for, told him there might be something in the warehouse side of things if he was interested. He thanked me. He texted me a week later to say he had an interview. That felt good. That felt like something going right. In the spring, about 7 months after my release, my daughter asked, through my brother, whether I would consider meeting her. Not to reconcile, not a big dramatic moment, just coffee and a conversation. She would bring the baby. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I want to be honest here about what I was feeling, because I think the honest version matters more than the neat version. I was angry. I am still angry if I'm truthful, and I think that's fair. 14 months. My business. My name. My wife's memory dragged through whatever this was. I am 63 years old and I am starting over in a rented room in a town where I know 2 people, and that is the result, at least in part, of my daughter choosing her husband's narrative over her father. But I was also thinking about a 14-month-old girl who pulled herself up on furniture and fell over laughing. Those 2 things lived in me at the same time, and I had to decide which one I was going to let make the decision. I met them at a Tim Hortons in Red Deer because that felt appropriately ordinary. No restaurant that meant anything to either of us. No history attached to the location. Just a Tim's in a strip mall, off Gates Avenue on a Tuesday morning. My daughter looked older. That's the first thing I noticed. Not in a bad way, just that time had moved across her face the way it moves across all of us, and she was no longer the young woman I'd watched stand beside her husband in that lawyer's office. She was someone who had been through something, and it showed, and I found I couldn't entirely separate that from my own experience of being through something. The baby was asleep in a carrier when they came in. Then she woke up. I don't know how to describe what happens when a child looks at you with no knowledge of anything that has come before. No history, no grievance, no story she's inherited about who you are or what you did or didn't do. She just looked at me with the absolutely uncomplicated curiosity that babies have, this complete openness, and grabbed my finger when I held it out. I didn't cry in front of my daughter. I waited until I was in the truck in the parking lot. We talked for nearly 2 hours. There were long silences. My daughter told me things I believed and things I'm still not certain about. I told her I wasn't ready to pretend nothing happened, and she said she wasn't asking me to. I told her I didn't know what, if anything, this became going forward, and she said she understood. She didn't ask for more than I was ready to give, which was more restraint than I expected, and more than she'd shown me when it mattered. But people change, or some people do, under enough weight. I see my granddaughter regularly now. I pick her up on Saturday mornings and we go to the park or the library, or sometimes just drive around, because she seems to find the motion soothing, this little person who didn't exist when my life fell apart, and who is entirely uninterested in that fact. She has no stake in the past. She only exists in the present, and when I'm with her for a few hours on a Saturday, I do too. My daughter and I are not what we were. I'm not sure we should be. Trust is not a thing you reconstruct from scratch on the same foundation that cracked. You have to be honest about that. Some of the repair work on a foundation means admitting the original pour was wrong, and we are still, both of us, figuring out what that means. I'm not going to tell you I've forgiven her fully because I don't know if that's true, and I'd rather be accurate. What I can tell you is that I've stopped letting the injury be the most important thing in the room. That's not the same as forgiveness. It might be something more practical than forgiveness. It might just be the decision to have a future instead of a permanent relationship with the past. My son-in-law will face what he faces. The legal system moves slowly, and I've stopped checking on it the way I used to. My brother keeps me posted if anything significant happens, and that's enough. The consulting work has grown. I'm not running a company, but I'm busy enough, and busy is its own kind of medicine. There's a younger contractor in the region who asked me last month if I'd be interested in a part ownership arrangement in a new venture. I'm thinking about it carefully. I'm thinking about everything carefully now. I take longer to sign things than I used to. I ask more questions. I read every page. Bernard calls me on Thursday nights. We don't talk about anything important, mostly hockey and the weather, and the particular absurdity of the price of groceries. Last Thursday, he told me he got a full-time position and had put down a deposit on an apartment. I said I was glad, and I meant it without qualification. There are still mornings. Fewer now, but still. When I wake up at 4 o'clock and the weight of it is sitting on my chest and I lie there in the dark of this rented room and feel the full measure of what was taken from me. The years, the business I built, the uncomplicated version of my relationship with my daughter that I'll never have back. The months inside that I can't recover. On those mornings, I don't try to argue myself out of it. I just let it sit there until it gets lighter, which it always does eventually. My wife used to say that you can't hold on to anything with a closed fist. You just end up with nothing and sore hands. I thought I understood what she meant when she said it. I think I understand it differently now. The morning I walked out of Bowden, I thought I was walking out into wreckage. And some of it was wreckage, that's true. But a Saturday morning at a park in Red Deer with a 2-year-old who thinks the ducks are the funniest thing she has ever seen in her life. That's not wreckage. That's something I didn't know was waiting for me. I'm still figuring out what comes next. I imagine I will be for a while. But I'm the one doing the figuring, in my own time, on my own terms. Nobody took that from me in the end. That's the part that matters.